All right, I think we're good here to get started in a minute.
Good. Looking out over my backyard where I have massive damage from two giant trees falling down a week ago.
Oh no, is it just crazy
Yeah,
wind
yeah.
or what was going on?
We had a windstorm a couple weeks ago, and they registered wind shears, which literally came up from the south on a diagonal, and we were in the path of the shear.
Yikes!
Because I lost two giant trees, and we took a third one down because it was exposed. And I mean, like, we're talking about 70, 80-foot trees that are like, 80 years old or more. And our neighbors down the block lost a car because a tree came down on top of
Oh
the
my
car.
goodness! Yikes!
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because the damage we see is you can almost trace it as a diagonal heading kind of southwest. It's going, and it's just fascinating if you walk away from my house, like to the municipal complex, the library, which is like across the street.
Yeah.
You could see down trees that are all in a path, like
Like a straight line
so
kind of
it
thing.
wasn't, it wasn't a tornado or anything like that, or even a microburst or anything. They called it a wind shear. And that's what we got. So I lost half my fence on my backside, and I lost half my neighbor's fence on my other side.
Man,
So
that's
yeah.
wild. That's wild. Do you have to have
Yeah.
somebody come out and get a tree that size, or you're like, all right, I got a
Oh
firewood
yeah,
project?
no, there's no way. I'm at my age. There's no way I'm doing that crap anymore.
Yeah.
We had a tree service come out, and they had to take apart the two trees that had fallen. They still got to come back and do the stumps because the stumps are tilted. Two of the stumps are tilted because the
Yikes.
trees, pulled them up, and they're halfway underground. One of the stumps is huge. It's so thick. And they damaged another tree on the way down, so they had to cut off two really big branches from another tree as well.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
I
That
got
sounds-
I got a lot of old. There's a lot of old growth trees in this development in this neighborhood. I've been here 6 years. We moved here 6 years ago from another house we had in town.
Yeah.
And the other house had nothing but woods in the back, so we had trees come down all the time, but nobody gave a crap because they came down in the middle of woods.
Yeah. Sure.
Here, when they come down, forget about it.
That is wild.
They're taking hostages on their way down because everything's so cramped.
Yeah. Well, that's a mess. I'm glad you're all right as far as no cars.
It was really funny though. They came down when I walked to the laundry room to check the batteries because the lights had flicked,
Mhm.
and I wanted to check the batteries for the flashlights. And as I was in there checking the batteries for flashlights, we hear the wood crashing.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. It's not even 10 yards to my right from the laundry room. If they had come the other way,
Oh man.
I would have been standing like an idiot right under them when they fell because that's where the laundry room is.
Oh my goodness.
So, I would have been fine if I'd stayed in the family room because it's on the other side of the house. But because I walked over to the laundry room, and I was thinking to myself, what a pathetic way to go. I mean, like, it's just so lame, like, to get crushed by a tree while you're checking batteries for your flashlight. There's no like honor in that. There's no excitement there.
Fabian, he was trying to hold up the tree to save everyone else.
Yeah, I was trying.
And then
That's what I was trying to save my family by catching the tree. That's what I was trying to do. What a hero! What a hero he was.
That's amazing.
And I just want my tombstone to say he died. He lived an ass. He died a hero.
There you go. Perfect. All right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off, and we can intro and dive into it. Sound good?
Sound good.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. I am joined today by a very special guest writer and creator, Fabian Nicieza. Super glad he could join us today. He is, of course, the writer of many of your favorite comics. We are going to talk X-Men Legends, Juggernaut, a little X-Men, and Cable and Deadpool, for example. But then, of course, he also has his novel coming out this summer, Suburban Dicks. So we are going to want to tap into what is going on there. First off, Fabian, thanks so much for joining us. How are you feeling today? Tree damage and wind shear aside.
I am doing well. Tree Damage is a week old, so I don't want to stretch that one out. I am doing well. I just thank you for the introduction. It was very kind of you. I just want to acknowledge officially that I may be the writer of some of our audience's favorite books, but I'm also certainly the writer of some of our audience's least favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I want that on the record too. All right,
a diverse and varied career. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to appeal to just one segment of the audience that likes me and I don't know, let's say likes good comics. I want to appeal to the audience that doesn't like me as well.
Yeah.
That's my entire promo hook for the book is if you like what I've written in the past, you're going to like this book. And if you don't like what I've written in the past, you're not going to like this book. But you should read it so that you can continue to not like me. So I'm a firm believer in I want to read something before I judge it. Watch something before I judge it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you can't know for sure you're going to hate my comic until you actually buy it and read it. And then by then it's too late because I already pocketed the money. There you go.
You got to maintain a little an educated portfolio so you can review these things with accuracy, right? You have to know why you don't like something. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're seeing too much of that. Like there's way too much opinion one way or the other based on the scantest of information about our entertainment content.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you see a trailer and a movie sucks. No, it really doesn't. You don't know because you haven't seen the movie yet. So I prefer to hate or love based on what I've actually read or watched. That's my preference.
Yeah, no, it's how you get good criticism. So like, all right, so I have read X-Men Legends and Juggernaut. I have my own version of education on those stories, so we'll talk about those a bit.
This is the segue into saying you're justified in your hate of them. There you go.
So let me tell you
Fair enough.
No, perfect. So what brought you back over the last few months you've had in the Marvel Universe, X-Men Legends and Juggernaut? What brought you back to these projects? Let's start with X-Men Legends, and I guess broadly, like what kind of projects?
I got to be honest, David. We're better off if we start with Juggernaut because that came first by quite a wide margin.
Sure, let's do it. Let's start Juggernaut.
How I came back is I never technically left because I'm a freelance writer, right? Sure. And you get offers and you decide if you're interested in them or not. And I had been doing semi-regular work for Marvel on a consistent level, just on stuff you never saw. No one ever saw because it was almost always custom comic work.
Yeah.
But I was doing 4 or 5 projects a year, it seemed, for custom comics project work. But comic book writing hasn't been my main gig for 15 years, 20 years almost.
Right.
So I've always done it based on interest as much as anything. Even more so once the college tuition payments started to dwindle and the mortgage ended. Once all those things started to happen, I really started to make choices based on interest. Mm-hmm. That being said, I had not done a regular project for Marvel since the Secret Wars Age of Apocalypse miniseries, and I don't even know what year that was. 2016? I don't know.
Yeah.
So in September of 2019, I got a call out of left field from Jordan White, the X editor, and I had just started getting I'd gotten the Hickman 2 miniseries that had just come out at that point, the first Powers and House miniseries. Out of curiosity, I don't follow the books on a monthly basis. I read them a bunch of stuff in trade paperback form down the road, But I was curious to see what Hickman was going to do because I find him a fascinating writer. Yeah. And I got a call from Jordan out of the blue, and he said, "Would you be interested in doing a Juggernaut miniseries?" And usually, I'm very trepidatious about offers from Marvel or DC for many justifiable reasons. But I love Juggernaut. I've always loved Juggernaut. And when he offered it to me, and I like Jordan a lot. I like working with him a lot. He's a really good editor. So when he offered it to me, my initial response is, yeah, okay, absolutely. But where are we at with him?
Yeah.
Where does he stand in context to this current status quo? And Jordan gave me the pitch that's exactly what he wanted to explore. Where does Juggernaut stand in this current status quo? And at that time, he wasn't going to be allowed on Krakoa. No non-mutant at that time was going to be allowed on Krakoa.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, sold, absolutely, let's go. And before I hung up the phone with him, he goes, oh, by the way, the last time we saw him, he got the gem ripped out of his chest. He lost the armor, and he got kicked into limbo. And he hangs up the phone. I'm like, wait, what? And I'm often responsible for and then blamed for having to be the continuity spackle boy. And it's incredibly annoying. And I feel and felt that I no longer want to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And normally that really would have bugged the hell out of me. But I got two problems. In my DNA, I'm incapable of not continuing the flow of continuity, because it's just who I am since I've been reading this stuff since 1967, and I worked on staff for 10 years, Yeah. And I also felt in this particular instance, the fact that he was starting from ground zero with no powers, no gem, and no home anymore, and no affiliation with the X-Men, all of that tied together perfectly for how I wanted to structure the story. So I started writing it in late September, early October 2019, and I finished my 5th plot script by January of 2020. And then the pandemic came, so the book got delayed.
Right.
So, it was in the interim, well after the fact, and after Juggernaut started to come out already, that Mark Basso called me and offered me the X-Men Legends stuff.
Gotcha.
So that was the X-Men Legends. And I'm throwing Marvel under the bus because I really don't care. The scheduling on that was ludicrous what they expected us to be able to do. And we didn't sign on, I think, knowing that was what we were going to be expected to do, especially Brett and Adelso, the artists, and Guru FX, the colorist. So we started X-Men Legends in late September, early October of 2020. And the first issue, which was an extra size issue, was coming out in February of 2021.
Yeah.
That's nuts. It's nuts. It's not. It shouldn't be that way. I'm sure there's lots of budgetary publishing reasons why they ramped it up and moved it sooner. And I understand all those because I've lived all those in my life. It just doesn't make it any less pressure on the creative person.
Sure.
And Brett and Adelso had to turn around 50 pages of art in just a few months, and it's a lot. So anything you see in print, they busted their humps to get us there.
Yeah.
And the X-Men Legends thing was a very difficult sell to me, for many obvious reasons. I really only did it because I felt it was the last chance I would ever get to shut my mouth about it. And I'm really glad that it's done, only in so much as now I can just shut up about it. Now no one will, after today, no one will ever ask me about Adam X again. No one will ever ask me about the Summers brother again. It's done. It's in the rearview mirror now. And whatever gets done with the character, or if nothing gets done with the character, it doesn't matter, because I got to tell the story pretty much exactly the way I had intended to tell it in 1995. The only difference is I lost about 38 pages of story content because my original breakdown was for a 4-issue miniseries, and this was 50 pages in 2 issues.
Sure.
So I had to really, I cut out a lot of the slower moments, the character beats, the interactions between Scott, Alex, and Adam and Corsair. I had to cut all of that out. I cut a lot out from my original plans, but the story beats themselves. The beginning, the middle, the end. That's all pretty much the exact structure I had planned for in 1995, and I was always intending to leave him off where we leave him off at the end of issue 2. In terms of his status quo within the X universe. He was there, but he wasn't there at the same time.
Would that mean, so in terms of the ending then, your intention back when this was going to be, a 4-issue mini in 95 that never came to fruition, your intention was to sort of reset the memories of the X-Men so they didn't remember, or is that a...
going to be left. He was going to be working at a farm with a kid and his injured father, and he would have no memory of who he was in the capacity that he was the would-be emperor of the Shi'ar Empire.
Yeah.
That was all out of his mind. He knew he was a mutant. He knew he had these powers. He knew that he was not fully human. He knew that he was half Shi'ar, but in his mind, he would have just been a guy on Earth who grew up on Earth, as far as he really knew. And that would have been it. But I also never necessarily planned to return to him unless the audience wanted it. I really had, when I originally introduced the brothers subplot, I started it as kind of almost like a curious, probing mystery for fun. Like, I just had Sinister say it without any actual plans. The minute that Bob Harris, the editor, liked it, the idea a lot, that's when I jumped into X-Force Annual 2 and introduced Adam. And the problem was that I had a plan for how he was going to be introduced and developed and then get his miniseries. And I had a verbal okay for that, but it never turned into reality. So as a result, his introduction and his maturation were always incredibly stunted, and never was able to come to fruition, which would have been the miniseries back then. And that would have been a story told. There would not have necessarily needed to be another story. Adam was never intended to be a part of X-Force or a part of X-Men. If anything, if there was popularity to him, if there was good reaction to him, if he had grown as a character in a good way at that time, the story would have been told out in space. It would have been a Starjammers book, or it would have been a Shi'ar book out in space, an X book out in space. That's where it would have been. But what would have come after a miniseries back in '95, or what would come after X-Men Legends 2? I don't think it's an Earth-based story for him.
Yeah.
But I never also worried about it one way or the other. I never gave it too much thought. I wanted to tell the mini, and I wanted to be done with the story when I was done with the mini. That was my hope back then. So other than the one last panel I threw into issue number 2, which ties into a panel into a miniseries I wrote for Marvel in the early aughts, which ties into the screen on screen thing that I did in X-Men 39, which tied into X-Men 98.
And you said you don't like continuity.
Well, it's not that I don't like continuity. I don't like being the person who's always expected to be responsible for it and then being blamed for being responsible for it. You know what I mean? It's like it becomes a no-win situation. Like this hole has a whole bunch of walls that the previous writer left, and the next writer doesn't want to pay any attention to those holes. Do you mind filling in those holes? And then after the holes are filled in is when a bunch of editors or writers look at it and go, those holes have bumps on them. They're not perfectly sanded.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, screw you. I just had to deal with your indifference if you're the new writer, or the previous writer's indifference in how they left it, or the editor's indifference in navigating it. I mean, the way people handle continuity now is 9 times out of 10 by ignoring it, and I don't get that either, because it creates a completely disjointed reading experience for the audience. You know?
Yeah.
So I think it's just got to be a balance, and I don't think most current writers or editors have found the way to strike that balance properly.
Yeah, no, it's a challenging thing, because it's one of the benefits of a shared universe, and of the history of Marvel, of having this continuity that you can leverage, of you coming in and doing an Adam X story, for example, and then being able to say, like, yeah, go back and check out X-Men 23, X-Men 39, the Captain Marvel mini. Like, that's, for me as a comics fan, that's a fun bit of like detective work to kind of put the pieces together. But I can see definitely as a creator how, like getting blamed for someone else's holes definitely sounds unappealing. With the Adam X story in X-Men Legends. So, like, first off, I'm glad you're doing the final word on Adam X here. I appreciate that. And so you never have to talk about it again. But in X-Men Legends, the way this ends, it sounds like you're definitely more interested in sort of like fully developing the Adam X story and that character, definitely more so than like I think what fandom glommed onto, which was the Summers family tree and the Summers family lineage and this third Summers brother thing. Are you at the end of this? Are you pretty satisfied with like, all right, I got to do my Adam X thing. I'm happy. That's his story. End of story. I'm good. Like, are you happy with the way this rolled out?
I'm happy enough with the way it rolled out. I honestly would have preferred the 30-page issue to be issue number 2, not issue number 1. I needed more space in issue number 2. Everything happens too quickly. Everything it feels disjointed to me. But that's only because I know what my original outline was. I know what my original plans were. When you see the Imperial Guard show up in issue toward the end of issue 2, that was actually the cliffhanger that would have been all of issue 3. You know what I mean? In the original 4-issue miniseries. And then when you see the him on the Shi'ar throne world with Lilandra and Oracle mucking around with their minds, that would have been all of issue 4. It wouldn't have been so perfunctory and quick. The process by which they make the decision to basically wipe their minds was not originally intended to be a 2-panel decision. It was intended to be, an 8-page decision. You know what I mean? So I look at it in a different way than a reader might. I'll say that I'm very pleased with it visually. I think Brett and Adelso did phenomenally good work for what was expected of them, the kind of work and the kind of tone and style that they were being asked to do. I think I had wanted Brett to do this, and I'm really glad that he agreed to do it, because he was the perfect choice in this century to be doing last century's style. Sure. The original artist I had wanted to do the miniseries was Jeff Johnson at that time, who was drawing Wonder Man for me as an editor, and really co-created the character with me in terms of his visuals. That's who I wanted back then. Jeff's style now is not the same as it was back then, so I don't think he would have been the right guy to handle the 2 issues right now, because X-Men Legends is really going for a tone. It's going for a very specific tone, and I'm sure we'll see that with Walt and Louise's issues coming up as well. And it's not as easy a tone as you think it might be to try to capture a style that is how you wrote or how you drew 30 years ago, or how an audience wanted to see the work 30 years ago. So I'm not writing 2 issues of X-Men Legends the same way that I was writing the 5-issue Juggernaut miniseries. Right? It's a conscious choice to try to write it in a style that not so much in terms of the dialogue or in terms of the captions necessarily even, but in terms of the pace and in terms of how a story unfolds. It's got more of a bombastic, big picture edge to it. It's got more density to the plot, because it's not taking 6 issues to tell a story. It's not. There are no opportunities to have Adam talk to the viewer in a 9-panel grid and just have dialogue piled on top of itself like a frickin' heap of mulch getting dropped on top of a driveway that you got to spread out on your lawn. So it's a very different tone. It's a very different pace. There's some readers who hate that. There's some pseudo-intellectualists who don't think.
Oh, hang on, Fabian. If you can hear me, I lost your audio just for a second. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine the whole time.
Okay, good. Nope, you're back. You just you cut out for a second there.
No, somebody got mad at me for calling them pseudo-intellectuals.
Yeah, that actually looked. It looked like I muted you. It looked like I got nervous.
Yeah, you muted me because you were mad. You're one of those cool comic readers.
I'm absolutely a pseudo-intellectual. How dare you?
You want your superhero to stare at the camera and talk for 9 panels in a row. So it's a story. It's a story whose beats are unfolding through the course of action and movement. That's really kind of antithetical to how superhero comics are being done now, especially at Marvel, where all the story beats unfold with characters talking about them after the fact. So it's just, it's a different structure. And I was very curious when I was looking at reviews of the issues, how some people understand it intrinsically what is trying to be done, and other people just are completely clueless and are comparing it or holding it to a completely different standard.
Yeah.
It's just so odd to me. It's like taking an episode of Dick Van Dyke and holding it up against an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I don't know. It's just
sure, right.
They're different. They're different creatures, even though they're half-hour sitcoms.
Yeah. No, there's a historical context that you're going for, that like this fits in this era because that was Adam X's era, and that's when this story chronologically fits. Which I really appreciate that you and the art team would take that tone and try to adhere it to the X-Men Legends. Like you mentioned, I'm looking forward to that in the Walt and Louise Simonson version too, where like, yeah, if you're going to do a story set in the past, it's actually very cool to visually craft it as if it was set then, like it's a bit of like tapping back into that well of why fans enjoyed those stories in the first place. I definitely appreciate that rather than trying to fully modernize it. Obviously there's recognition it's coming later. It's released in 2021, but like I think just visually it connects a lot easier if it has that tone set, which is its own artistic vision, right? To try and capture that feel of like, what was this like in 1994 or whatever.
Yeah. And if you notice, there's a lot of page turn surprises. There's a lot of big panels and big splashes that aren't predicated so much on that they visually will look cool the way it is done nowadays. Double page spreads of devastation.
Sure.
After the superhero fight has already happened. This is big panel reveals as a result of the story beats rather than as a result of the story triggers the reveal rather than the reveal triggering the story, which is how a lot of current comics are being done. I don't understand it, but it's the way it's done now. So, and I can do that. I can do it that way too, no problem. I just tend to prefer the story generating the reveal rather than the other way around. Oh my God! Look at that. Is that from the book itself?
This is from Legends. Yeah, this is from issue 2.
Yeah, here. I don't have issue 2 yet. I didn't go to the store to get it last week, and I probably won't get my copies for another few weeks. I went to the store to get issue 1. That was good enough for me. That's crazy,
right?
Why does my guy get a dotted line?
Well, he's a half brother with the Summers, right?
Yeah, does that warrant a dotted line though? Shouldn't he have a solid line?
This sounds like a good question for Marvel editorial. I mean, here's the thing too: they don't even key that into the legend. They don't actually have a specification there in the legend what a dotted line means.
And why does Vulcan, Havoc, and Cyclops all get a solid line connected to Corsair and Catherine Summers? Why? That's not fair.
Well, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding here is that Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, they're all the children of Corsair and Catherine, right? Whereas Adam, per Legends.
Was Vulcan a child of Corsair and Catherine?
Well, that's an interesting question. Maybe.
I thought he wasn't.
I think he wasn't.
I never read the story.
I think you're right. In Deadly Genesis.
I never will read the story. So I thought it was Corsair and some alien woman.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm 100% right. They're 100% wrong. So
I think that's fair.
Even the family tree that they put into the book that finalizes the Adam X story disrespects Adam X. There you go. So it actually is totally fitting. It's perfect. It works out really well.
What a perfect way to go. Yeah. We'll have to dig into that. I need to do some research now. All right, let's talk then. Let's connect what you were just saying about in terms of writing and the style and tone about writing Juggernaut. So that's you doing a mini in the modern day, right, in this Krakoa era. Is that something where you're talking about the different styles and you sort of observing modern comics in the 9-panel grid and sort of just the approach when you're writing a Juggernaut mini, for example? Are you consciously like how do you balance like, okay, this is the way comics want you to move now versus just like your own instincts in terms of like this is how I prefer to tell a story?
It's the latter. I don't give a crap about what an audience's expectations are for how a story should be told to them. Our job is to tell the story. I'm not a big fan of fans thinking that the work they buy is supposed to validate them. I'm a fan of fans buying stories they like. That's all. And if you don't like it, don't buy it. I quit lots of my monthly book plenty of times growing up because they bored me. So I did not write Juggernaut to what I would consider a current modern style. I wrote him to what interested me to try to do as a writer. And I wanted to do, instead of a 5-issue miniseries that was one decompressed story, I wanted to do the exact opposite. I wanted to tell 5 self-contained, incredibly compressed stories with ongoing subplots. So it was its own experiment in a way. Overall, one I'm pretty pleased with. And it helps to have an artist like Ron Garney, who's just a phenomenally good storyteller. He's able to show you a lot in 3 panels, whereas other artists or writers expected to take 3 pages. And I just purposefully wanted to try something a little different, and that was kind of forced on me in a way because he was being reintroduced without the gem and without the armor. As a result, happened to him in Rosenberg's X-Men run. If I had not had that to contend with, it may have been a pretty different story in terms of its structure. But the decision that we would show the burden of what power means to Kane through a present day story combined with the things he did to reattain the power was really became the linchpin of the whole book to me. We're telling the same theme in 2 different ways in 2 different time periods, right? Like the previous 6 months leading to the present, and then what the present is. And it shows that he felt he was nothing without the power. And it's only now, having reacquired it, that he realizes that he has to be something because of the power. You know, so I don't see him as being remotely redeemed, quote unquote. I think he's a character that has so many built-in excuses for the disparity in how he's been presented in the past. Yeah, raging monster versus, you know, dopey good guy. You know, I got to write him in the X-Men Forever miniseries extensively. And because of the nature of that series, it required absurd amounts of, there's that word again, continuity, under awareness. So I read pretty much all of Juggernaut's appearances up to that point. And the one thing that struck me, which I played out throughout the course of that miniseries, since it was about the present day characters at that time jumping back into their bodies, their minds jumping back into their bodies in the past. There were many, many times where Juggernaut was off the table because of the stupid things he did or got involved in, you know? And I got to play that out.
Or he was stuck in concrete for a year.
An entire issue of X-Men Forever where it's just, anytime we cut to him, it's just black panels because he's stuck in concrete.
Yeah,
and if you're 10 years older, let's say, or 5 years older, whatever, and you go back in time and realize I spent a year of my life stuck in concrete, what should you be thinking? Should you be thinking, damn that Spider-Man, I'm going to get my vengeance on him? Or are you going to be thinking, what an idiot I was that I got myself into a situation where I got stuck in concrete?
Right.
What kind of an idiot does that, you know? And I opted for the latter with Kane. I wanted him to come out of that miniseries with the realization that his entire life has been a quest for power because of his insecurity, but having achieved that power, he's never done anything secure with it. Right. So I set him up at the end of that miniseries 20 years ago, almost, to take on a more active role, not as a hero, but as a proactive force that can be used in a positive way. And that's exactly where we leave him at the end of this current miniseries. It's almost like I went full circle. I ended this miniseries with a new status quo for him, which is not all that different than the status quo I left him with at the end of X-Men Forever, where he was going to be a bounty hunter for the commission on superhuman registration, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
superhuman activity, whatever it was called. There's so many acronyms. Mark Grunwald loved acronyms. So I leave him now with the realization that I have to do something with this power. And that means for him, I have to help other people like me to not be as stupid as I was. That's the goal. So that's where we end him at the end of the Juggernaut miniseries. So if it's Juggernaut and the Unstoppables, the goal is to help other people that are like him, people who you can try to throw a line out to and pull them out of the negative into something a little more positive. Doesn't make them heroes. Doesn't mean they're going to be on the side of authority and law or good guys or anything like that. They're going to cheat a lot. They're going to be real dickish about some of the things they might do. But the potential is there. It's almost a reverse Thunderbolts in a way.
Yeah.
And that's a good status quo for him. Whether whatever Marvel chooses to do down the road with it is what they choose to do. I don't worry about that stuff anymore.
Sure.
After Nomad got shot in the head, Jack Monroe got shot in the head and shoved in a trunk in Captain America 20 years ago. I basically stopped worrying about what was going to happen to my work after I was done doing it. You know what I mean?
That's a tricky thing I can see needing to give that up. I mean, I really do like the status quo you've set up for Juggernaut here. I do want to pencil in Juggernaut and the Unstoppables as a possible sequel to this, because I think that would be incredibly appealing, honestly. But yeah, I mean, I like this nature of taking Kane and finding the gray area between, okay, he's been the supervillain, he's been with the X-Men. None of that quite feels right at this point. Now having him be an actual person with remorse for having lived that way, I think winds up being the most interesting way you could write him. And having him have D-Cell, this new character that you've added, a new mutant in the Marvel Universe, having him kind of take her under his wing and be like, I need to protect you and I need to help you, even though she is very capable herself, and just, I like that role for him. Like, okay, let's help these people who don't know quite what to do with themselves. And not literally like we're the heroes, but just like they need help. Let's figure it out. I think that's a good role for this character. Now,
yeah, I also like that I could, every character I brought into that book for him to fight was intended to be a character that was almost the antithesis of what Juggernaut's powers are, other than the Hulk, which was a different thing altogether. That was brought in order to show Kane what a hypocrite he has been in his life. But bringing in someone like Quicksand, or bringing in someone like Primus, or even D-Cell, every one of their power sets is the almost the opposite of the unstoppable force, the runaway train Juggernaut is, and I really like that because it creates a challenge for Kane, and it created opportunity for Ron on a visual basis too. Mm-hmm. So if he's going to be surrounded by those other characters, that's interesting, because then you're creating a team that also has an interesting visual dynamic and an interesting combination of powers that allows you to do some cool things from a story standpoint in terms of the action. I know action is not something a lot of readers want to hear about anymore. It used to be something we cared about in comics. We're back to that. Now it's things that characters talk about, but in my comics, it's still things characters do. So I like the combination of
they share their journal entries while the action goes on, right? They share their little diary entries while the action's happening.
Or they talk to a camera. Yeah, or they talk to a camera that's conveniently positioned right in front of
a lot of convenient cameras in the Marvel universe. Absolutely.
Yes.
So with Juggernaut, you're working here with Ron Garney and the team on this really interesting mini, but it's set in this X office and it's set in this very particular era, right? Like you mentioned, it's post Hickman, House and Powers, kind of reconfiguring like the status quo of X-Men, which has been a really big deal for readership. It's led to a lot of people diving into X-Men, maybe even for the first time, as far as comics readership goes. Now, you referenced kind of what's going on with X-Men and Krakoa. It's not like heavily set in that version because Juggernaut's not a mutant, and Professor X shows up to be like, Not only are you not allowed, but also I'm your stepbrother, and I kind of don't like you much, so I'm not going to like sugarcoat this. What are your feelings about sort of this era and writing in it with Krakoa? Like, what's positive for you? What's negative? Or was it all just kind of whatever as you did your Juggernaut?
It was actually kind of whatever, but not in a negative way. It was whatever because it was so early in the release of the new titles, and so early. I mean, when you're reading the Juggernaut miniseries, you understand is almost a full year after I wrote the Juggernaut miniseries. So in the meantime, the other titles all had 8-10 issues come out, and they evolved their Krakoa status quo through the course of that time period in a way that kind of got away from Juggernaut. It kind of, because humans are allowed on Krakoa. So then it ends up, if you're comparing it on a time basis and you're looking at Juggernaut and going, well, it's happening at the same exact time as X-Force 12 is happening. Well, no, it's really not, because I wrote it when X-Force 2 was happening, Right. So people came out of Juggernaut going, "Oh, Xavier's a dick for not letting Juggernaut on Krakoa." Well, when I wrote it, it was just the status quo that was being developed at that time. They just chose to evolve it as writers and editors for whatever reason. I'm not in the writer's room, so I don't know. And I prefer to be on the periphery of it. Actually, Jordan had recently invited me if I wanted to participate in the writers' meetings and the shared things like that. And I was like, no, it's all right. Thank you. I'm all right. I don't need to. I'm not. I'm working on something right now, but I can't say what it is yet. It's not so. What I'm working on is not so dependent that it requires me to look at 8, 10, 12 different plots by different writers. Sure. It's not really where I'm at in my career right now or in my brain. If I were 35, it would be super fun and exciting. But at 59, it's like, no thanks. I'm okay. I don't. Just tell me what I can or can't do. That's all, So I don't know what the story beats are. I read everything pretty much well after the fact. I read digital trades, so I'm usually not reading the stuff until usually 6 to 10 months at the least since it's come out. Currently my bedtime reading has been the Mark Waid's Doctor Strange series. I think that's a couple years old at this point.
Sure.
So I try not to keep up, but I think it's brain damaging to try to keep up.
Is that for research or is that for fun? Doctor Strange.
It's for fun.
Okay. Good deal.
Nice try, though. It was a good try. Doctor Strange is one of the ones that got away. I've always wanted to write at least a year's run on that book, and I never got the chance. So it would have been fun if it were for research purposes, but it's not.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was actually one of the questions we had here from a listener, which was, are there any big 2 wish list characters? So Doctor Strange, maybe. Are there any others that you're like, I really wish I had done
Marvel, my 2. See, you got to understand that I've written every character pretty much at both companies now, but there's a difference between writing a character and writing a book, and you used to get on a book and think you were going to be on it for 4, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, Most writers don't think that way anymore. Generationally, they change their thinking. They want to tell a story and then they're done. Or even if they want to stay on the book, they're being changed because they're shuffling creative teams all over the place all the time anyway. The 2 that I always wanted to write regularly at Marvel back in the day were Doctor Strange and Captain America. Those were the 2 that I really would have loved a shot at both of those monthly. Cap I could have written for 5 years without a problem. Doctor Strange, I don't think so. I know I had a big story I wanted to tell that would have been 12 issues and then could have propelled ramifications, could have propelled for another 12. So let's say I had a 25 issue run of Doctor Strange. And
sure.
That would be cool. That would have been cool. I would have liked that.
Yeah.
I tried to get it back in like 90, 91, and I just the editor Ralph Macchio chose to go in a different direction. But that was one that got away. And Cap I always wanted to write, but at the time Mark Grunwald was pretty much never going to give that book up. So I got I got to write Nomad, which was Cap Peripheral, and I got to write the Adventures of Captain America limited series with Kevin McGuire. So at least I got my finger in the pie.
Absolutely.
At DC, it's Nightwing is the key. Nightwing and Superman are two characters I would love to have had a shot at. I've gotten to write both, obviously, and it was really, really rewarding for me to get to write both of them, especially Nightwing, because Dick Grayson's my favorite character in comics. But I never got long runs on any DC title for that matter. Even Red Robin was like abruptly screwed around with twice. So those are the two. So the two DC and the two Marvels are those four guys.
Gotcha. Those are good answers. No, I could definitely see a good Nightwing run from you. I think that would be super appealing. As far as like what's coming next from you, we got your novel Suburban Dicks, which I want to give you space to talk about. Let's start there. What can people expect from this novel, and why? What are you most excited about for like people to get to explore here?
Well, I'm considering that I had the original story idea broken down in like 94, 95.
Okay.
It's ironic that it's a product of the 90s.
It's the Adam X of novels.
It's coming out in 2021.
Yeah.
I always wanted to tell the story. I wanted it to write prose, and I just never had the confidence to do it. It really boils down to that. It's as simple as that. I always wanted to write books, and this book or this series, because I have more stories to tell with these characters. I just never had the confidence to do it, and I finally gained the confidence by not caring that I didn't have the confidence to do it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I just reached the point where I said, if I don't do this, when am I going to do it? And I never undertook it with the idea that it was going to earn me income of any kind of substantial nature. I did not think of it as a career opportunity so much as a career checklist that I wanted to mark off. You know. Yeah. So I started writing it toward the end of 2017, and got good initial feedback from a couple people, and then just kept writing. And I finished it January of 2019, I think.
Okay.
And I didn't write it every day because I was doing other stuff. There were sometimes where a week or two went by where I didn't write anything in the book, you know. And I spent most of 2019 editing it because I had to cut a lot. And then I got an agent who was willing to represent it, and that changed the dynamics tremendously because I did not know that I'd be able to get an agent, much less a good agent at a powerful agency.
Yeah.
And that turned into a bidding war where I had multiple publishers want to purchase it. And it was incredibly rewarding and really exciting and a lot of fun. But ultimately, it was just it's financial validation, which I'm really glad about. My wife is very happy that it's sold in a 2-book deal to a major publisher.
Nice, yeah.
Because I originally told her if my best expectation was I'd sell it to a small mystery paperback book publisher for $5,000, and she gave me a look like she wanted to hit me with a baseball bat. So selling it in a pretty substantial deal, a 2-book contract to a major publisher, and having it's already been optioned for television development. I just can't announce where or with who yet.
That's exciting.
But that was all happening at the same time. Actually, the TV group of the agency had the manuscript at the same time as the New York publishing group was showing it to publishers. So I had, in a 2-3 month span back in late 2019, early 2020, I was juggling conversations with book editors about it as we were trying to decide who we wanted to go with, and juggling multiple TV production companies who were interested in it, and just trying to decide who we wanted to go with, you know?
Yeah.
And it was super fun and super, super rewarding. Obviously, at this stage in my career, at my age, it's really rewarding to do something that's completely out of what people expect of you, what they think your bandwidth is. I don't think it's out of my bandwidth because I've had the idea for almost 30 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So could it be out of my bandwidth when it's something I wanted to write in 1995? And I just made a rule for myself. I said, no tights, no flights, no fights. It's a novel. It's a murder mystery about people struggling to deal with their own insecurities, their own failures, their own prejudices, their own fears, and it's fun and it's funny and it's fast paced. So it's entertaining. So I think the reaction I've gotten from a lot of people, which has been super rewarding because it's exactly what I was hoping for, is that you're entertained and it leaves you with something to think about. You know, it's the two lead characters are a 34-year-old woman who is pregnant with her 5th child, and she should have been an FBI profiler, but the pregnancy of her 1st child derailed that for her. And a 29-year-old reporter who won a Pulitzer Prize in college for a story that took down the administration of the New Jersey governor. And now, 10 years later, almost, he's working for a weekly suburban newspaper. So his downfall in his 20s was substantial. And they knew each other in high school because she used to date his older brother. And each of them need to validate themselves for different reasons. She needs to prove to herself that this is who she is, and technically by doing so, who she should have always been. And he needs to validate himself by proving that his initial success was not a fluke, that he made a lot of mistakes, but the core of him is somebody who gets to the truth, you know? And the mystery is really about suburban fear of change in cultural, in diversity, and demographics. It's about white fear of change, which is absurdly prevalent on this planet now. Has been, but we're a lot more aware of it now than maybe we ever used to be. And it's set in the suburbs where I live, and I've lived here in this general area for 30 years, but in New Jersey since I was about 7 years old. So I have a real keen understanding about the changes and the fluctuating movements of the demographic makeup of my area. So the murder mystery, because of the nature of the murder mystery, it's a Indian gas station attendant who gets killed, and the reason that he was killed could be as a cover up to something that happened 50 years ago. And that combination is really what instigates the whole exploration into the shifting demographics in suburbs and what people are afraid of. So my goal was to tell murder mysteries, and I'm not a murder mystery writer. So how do I do that if I don't think of myself as one? And the way to do that was to try to hook the murders into thematic context. And so the first book is, suburban change of demographics and white flight and white fear. The second book is marriage in suburbia, and the often stilting, numbing reality of your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month existence in suburbia.
Sure.
And why possibly we shouldn't necessarily blame a spouse if she decides to kill her husband. So it's the same characters. It's Andrea Stern and Kenny Lee, and so she's gives. I don't want to give away the ending of the first book, but if she's pregnant, at some point she's going to give birth. So in the first book, she's tremendously pregnant throughout the entire book. In the second book, she's carrying the damn baby around everywhere because the baby's about 10 months old in the second book.
Sure.
So the second book, which I'm editing now and doing some revisions to my editor's notes, and it'll come out in 2022. And it doesn't have a title yet, so I can't. It's Suburban Dicks 2 for now. Okay. Although that's actually not a bad idea. Suburban Dicks TOO.
TOO, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, TOO. Suburban Dicks, 2. That book is explores thematically what marriage is in the suburbs now in America. And I've had people who've read it already who tell me it's really is really fun, funny, entertaining, complex, and depressing as hell. And I was like, okay, good. Then I guess my second book is doing exactly what I wanted it to, also, because the first book had, you come away from the first book feeling entertained, but a little niggly haunting in you too, I hope, because of the nature of the themes.
Sure, right.
I hope that the same thing happens with book 2. I hope you come out of it having been very entertained, but a niggling sense of utter depression if you're married. And it was a 2-book contract. I hope I can do more, but that I'm sure that the publisher is waiting to see how the first one sells.
Sure.
We've already gotten 2 excellent reviews from 2 of the leading publications, Kirkus Review and Publishers Weekly, both gave it a starred review, which, especially I've been told with Kirkus, is really hard to come by. So I'm pretty pleased about that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I hope, I hope it sells well. I hope it sells well enough that that they want to do more, because I would like to do more. I have about 5 or 6 with these characters that I'd like to do. And the story world I like too, because the story world is if I turn my camera around and move it around, the story world is my backyard.
Yeah,
It's the houses behind me. It's my neighbors. It's me. It's my own house. It's so that's fun too, because I've spent 35 years writing in the Marvel universe and writing in the DC universe and writing, marketing and academic brand narratives for Pirates of the Caribbean and Halo and Avatar. This is me writing in a New Jersey suburb where I live.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different beast. And it's really been fun to do, because I always had to work really hard to try to get that into my comic stuff because of the nature of what the comic stuff was.
Right.
And now I don't have to work that hard to get it in there.
Yeah.
Because it's what it's supposed to be.
It fits.
Is that stuff. Yeah. So I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy about all of that.
That's amazing.
I hope the TV option gets picked up too. I hope that they can find a showrunner that gets the platform to green light it, because I think it would make an excellent TV show. I always did. And it would be nice to see that happen too, not just because of the money, but because it helps the book tremendously, and it's also super validating to be able to sell a book and a TV show that are in a genre, in a tone, and in a style that is not what you would think of when you think of me. If not to presume anyone in the audience is ever thinking of me, but you know what I mean.
No, I do.
You hear Fabian Nicieza and you think X-Men, or you think Deadpool or whatever, and I didn't necessarily think that when I thought Fabian Nicieza. You know what I mean? My brain, that's not my go-to. It's never been my go-to.
Yeah.
I have no problems with being Fabian Nicieza, the comic book writer. That's fine, because that's been my career. But it's not been the totality of my career. You know what I mean? So
no.
I like this because it gives me the opportunity to think of myself in a different way, and then the audience can't contradict that, because the book is there, the book exists, so on that end of it, it's pretty damn cool to have this happen now, more so than 20 years ago.
Yeah, gotcha. No, so that's awesome. So people should look for Suburban Dicks coming this summer, and then a sequel later.
June 22nd.
June 22nd.
June 22nd. It comes out. You can pre-order now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you buy books, you can pre-order the book now.
And I should confirm for our listeners that this is a book without pictures, I take it. So we will have to confirm this is not an illustrated work.
There is a picture. There's a picture on the front cover, and then there's a picture of me on the inside flap of the back cover.
So
okay.
So
other than that,
comics.
There are no pictures. There are no pictures. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just for those in the audience that possibly might be a little thick. this is a book, a prose novel.
Prose is a little advanced. Prose is a little PhD.
And I've been told as a result of this, I'm not a comic book writer. I'm an author.
Ooh.
All right. So I just would like that out there officially, that I'm an author now.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't an author before with 100 million comics sold and 1,000 credits, but I'm an author now.
Perfect. That's amazing. Cool. So we'll include links to all that and your stuff here in the show notes for people who want to check that out as well. All right. So I think we're coming up over an hour. I really appreciate your time here today, Fabian. Thanks to everybody who's been listening to us live and chiming in with questions. That's all greatly appreciated as well. I quite appreciate the support. I do want to get in one listener question here, Fabian, which was
go for it.
You mentioned the TV options for this novel, which I hope comes to fruition. Of your comics work, of the stuff that you've written, I guess what's the kind of, like, is it New Warriors? Is it Nomad? What's the thing you're like proudest of that you would love to see adapted? And then if so, like, how would you want to see it done?
Those are two different questions, technically.
It's true.
What I am proudest of, and probably will always be proudest of, is New Warriors, just because of the time in my life and what it meant to me and my career.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I'll always be proudest of. That's not to say that that's what I think would best be adapted to film or television.
Okay.
The honest answer is a kooky one, because the truth is the best ideas I've had for superhero stuff that would be adapted for television or film are almost always the ones that the companies didn't want to do. So I think Nomad would have made a great TV series. I still do. It actually, technically, it was a TV series in the early 90s with Lorenzo Lamas called Renegade. They basically just stole Nomad, lock, stock, and barrel. But there's a lot of pitches that I've had in my career to Marvel, more so Marvel than DC, that they didn't want to do. Even back in the early 90s, at the height of my sales success for them, they still didn't want to do them. And those are the ones I think would have made better TV shows. I had I had a Marvel Boy series I wanted to do, which would have spun off of Justice #4 miniseries, which was about a kid with superpowers and a father who should have had superpowers but doesn't, and is trying to train his son to be the greatest hero ever, and his son doesn't necessarily want to be. That was going to be the Marvel Boy series. I can't even go. I've had a project I wanted to do that I've pitched a couple times and they never want to do it, so I stopped bothering. Called Marvel Town, and Marvel Town was going to be a North Jersey suburb that has gotten so much detritus and debris from superhero battles that they decided to rename themselves Marvel Town and turn themselves into a small little tourist attraction, because there's like a centerhead in the town square, and everything, it's kind of like Archie's meets the Marvel Universe, because it really was just about the people living in Marvel Town, and some of their secrets or some of their existence happens to have tie-ins to real ongoing things in the Marvel Universe. Like, the sheriff is secretly a Hydra agent, all this other kind
of course, yeah.
So, a Romeo and Juliet type couple where she may be half alien, stuff like that. That's one I've always wanted to do that they never bit and they never will bite. So there's what you never got to see from me would make better television than what you have gotten to see from me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I dig that. That Marvel Town one I can totally see, like in like Marvel Cinematic Universe territory, of almost like it's kind of like a spinoff of like Damage Control idea. Like, what are the real people dealing with all of this, debris and Marvel, like, shenanigans and artifacts and all that. That sounds pretty entertaining.
If you live in North Jersey and you got to commute into Manhattan on a daily basis, like, can you imagine the amount of delays you got to deal with? Because the Avengers are fighting, a Sentinel, or Atlantis is attacking again, or what? So it was never intended to be done in a coy fashion, but sure, there was going to be a lot of humor in it. But even back then, when I pitched it to Mark Reynolds and Tom DeFalco, Mark always loved it, and he would have done anything that he thought was different. But they just didn't think that Marvel should publish those kinds of books. I wanted to do the reason there's a Bob Agent of Hydra in Cable and Deadpool. The character is something I pitched in the early 90s. I wanted a Bob Agent of Hydra miniseries in the early 90s, and Tom didn't want to do it because he didn't want to do comedy, and he also thought that it would diminish Hydra as an organization. And I kept trying to tell him, Tom, they wear green and yellow and they snap their arms and go, "Hail Hydra." They diminish themselves. There's not a lot I can do to really help their cause.
Yeah.
This is one of their frontline guys whose teeth always come flying out of his mouth when Captain America kicks them. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted it to be. The guys on the front line. I tried pitching Bob, Agent of Hydra, 2 different ways, both as Bob, Agent of Hydra, and then I reformatted it into a pitch called Cannon Fodder, which was one of each of the different organizations.
Yeah.
And Secret Empire and Sons of the Serpent, and there's a place they go to. There's basically a place they go to for post-traumatic stress therapy, and like one of those nice little medical refuge communes in the hills of New York or Pennsylvania. Uh-huh. And they go for a weekend and they have therapy, and they all basically let loose their frustrations, their fears, their everything, right? Why they're in these organizations.
Yeah.
And we flash back through their analysis and their group analysis. We flash back to stories of what they were involved in, and a lot of it was comedy, but there's some tragedy there too, and some sadness and drama. But I, and then Tom said, "No, we don't do comedy." I was like, "All right, Tom."
That's a shame.
I don't know, Tom. Have you read Thunderstrike lately, Tom?
Shots
but I
fired.
can say that because I love Tom and Tom loves me, so I can make fun of him all I want.
That's amazing. I'm here for Cannon Fodder. That sounds super fun. Speaking of comic stuff, you mentioned you're sitting on an X-Men project you can't talk about. Anything coming in the comics line that you can talk about?
Nope, I don't do that much. My Outrage book still is my creator-owned Outrage series with Riley Brown is on Webtoon, which is a digital platform that you can download for your phone or your iPad. It's the world's leading global digital comic book site. We were on a temporary scheduling hiatus on season 2, but you can read all existing 40-something chapters on Webtoon for free. And we're going to get back to it once our artists are able to catch up on their schedule, because they're weekly chapter drops once you start going.
Cool.
So of course you screw up your schedule, then they're not weekly chapter drops anymore. There's a hiatus. But Outrage is something we've been working on for a couple of years, and I'm really happy with it. It's a lot of fun. The character comes out of your social media device and smacks the crap out of you if you're being an ass on social media. And then it's sort of expanded beyond that now as government agencies became interested in what the heck this thing is and why it exists. And that's it. I'm not doing that much in comics. I'm an author now.
You're an author now. Yeah, absolutely.
Author. I got an auteur. So being an auteur takes a lot of work. It's time consuming to be an author as opposed to being a writer. If I was just a writer, I could willy-nilly do anything.
But the writers are everywhere. Writers are all over the place.
Yeah, writers are a dime a dozen. Authors. Authors, we're not like Starbucks, So no, I gotta do rewrites on the second book to the editor's notes, and he gave me some valid notes that kind of had me. They're wonderful editor's notes. As a writer, you love it when the editor says we got to cut about 5,000 words, and I have an idea to add 2 subplots. Yeah. Like, wait a minute. How am I supposed to cut 5,000 words and add 2 subplots? So I am actually in the process now, and I'm going to get right back to it after we're done, of doing exactly that. Okay. Trying to cut out 5,000 words and add 2 subplots to the second book.
Good luck.
And that's kind of right now. That's kind of no kidding. I cut 8,000 words out of it actually, but now while I'm percolating the subplots, 2,000 more words have crept their way back in. It's really hard to write without the use of words. I've come to realize in books. If I could write without using words, it would make a huge difference in the word count of the book. So that's my goal for my third book, is to try to find a way to write the book without words, because then I won't have to worry about cutting them.
Yeah. Maybe some like narrative captions, insert silent panel here, like get some
Or
visuals
maybe if I
going.
have someone, if I have someone just draw what I have in mind
Uh-huh.
to write, then they could just draw it in the book, and then that could be the book.
Yeah.
It'll be a lot less words because there'll be pictures.
And you send that back to your editor and say, no problem. 5,000 words
No
cut.
problem. I don't need to worry about cutting 5,000 words because there's the pictures.
Yeah, there you go. Got everything you needed.
And that I'm percolating the third book in the series now, even though I probably shouldn't be because I don't have a contract to do it. But I'm doing that too. That's in the note taking stage.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm not a comic book writer, Dave. I really haven't thought of myself as a comic book writer as the sole means of my income in 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the fact I did a couple projects for Marvel in the last year is like almost miraculous because that hadn't happened for quite a while. And I got to be honest with you, I've been offered a couple other things at Marvel. So on the one hand, it's really nice to have them offer you work because it's always nice to be offered work.
Yeah, for sure.
But on the other hand, it shows how my mindset has really changed over time in that I've actually turned down a couple projects now in the last 6 months because they didn't interest me enough. I didn't think that I would bring enough to them, Yeah. And that I'm actually really happy about that. I got to be honest with you. I'm really happy that I can say no because I spent way too many years of my life not saying no to things than I probably should have,
Yeah. Sounds like a really healthy place to be, honestly.
Yeah, it is. I'm pretty good right now. Being a freelance writer was never necessarily my intention or my goal. Oddly enough, because I love the office job. I loved working in an office environment. I like managing groups of people and being a boss, or even not being the boss and still being in a dynamic group of people with a goal and a function on a daily basis. I love that interaction. But I'm at the age now where that's not going to happen anymore. I mean, I was even in an office environment like 10 years ago. I had a virtual world startup called Fungo Play, which is a kids sports themed virtual world. And I was the chief creative officer and one of the founders of that thing. That was 5 years of my life. And I was in the city every day for 2-3 of those years.
Right.
It was back in 2012, 2013. So I've always liked that balance. I never thought of myself as a full-time writer in my brain. But now I'm hitting 60 this year, and I don't have to think of myself as a full-time writer anymore because now I can think of myself as an author.
It's awesome. It's awesome. No, I love to hear it. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate you hopping on and having this conversation with me and with us. It's been awesome to talk to you about. I appreciate you, especially too, like when I hear you, like you've so clearly moved on, right, in your life, and it's all these people want to come to you and hey, what about X-Men, right? Because there's this fandom that is built around this thing that you used to do, right? And it's got to be a little weird and in a little like, but there's all these people that are coming to it, especially the way everything's been digitized now, where like all this work that you did, people are coming to it fresh now and loving it. And that's probably, I don't know, is that something you anticipated? Like when you're writing these things, because you owned X-Men essentially from like 92 to 94, 95-ish, right? Was that ever in the back of your mind, like this is going to be a big deal 20, 30 years from now?
In a way, yeah, because it's no different. A fan approaching me at a convention to want to talk about this stuff, or a podcast where they want to focus on that. It's not that different in my mind than me geeking out about George Perez, meeting George Perez, or
Sure.
or getting to know Walt Simonson and Louise, and getting to know Chris Claremont and Jim Starlin. I've been in this industry for 35 years. All right. I've sold 100 million comics, 150 million. I don't even know. Right. I have over 1,000 credits. Last March, right before the pandemic hit and we all shut down, was the last convention I did in Mexico City.
Sure.
Lama Lake convention. I'm sitting at lunch with Jim Starlin. And I'm thinking to myself, and Jim and I have known each other for years now, and we're friends, and I like him. But I'm sitting there at lunch, and there's that moment where I think to myself, I'm effing having lunch with Jim Starlin.
Yeah.
If you had told me when I was 12 years old, buying Captain Marvel off the racks because I saw his covers and they blew me away, that I'd be having lunch with Jim Starlin in Mexico City, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, I totally get that aspect of it. And I'm totally comfortable with it. I understand it. But it's like you said, though, it's just a part of a career. It's no different than when people want to overly harp on the work I did with Rob Liefeld, where that was basically a year of my life.
Yeah.
I'm
right.
59 years old. That was 1 year of my life, and 12 comics or 14 comics out of the thousands that I've written, So I have no problems with fans who have that as an interest or a focus even. I just don't want them to think that's the totality of my interest or my focus.
Oh, sure.
And it's only when they don't quite get that it gets a little uncomfortable. Because you know how some fans can be. It's understandable, but they can get a little self-righteous about their own interests. And sometimes mine just doesn't coincide with theirs. And it may even just be a moment, because maybe tomorrow I'll be more interested in talking to you about, X-Force 26 than I am today. You know what I mean?
Right.
The only way you can't lose is if you come up to me and want to talk about New Warriors. Then you're golden. Then it's no problem.
You always got time for New Warriors. Yeah.
Always got time for New Warriors fans, because they were the cool ones. That's why.
That's amazing. All right. Awesome. Fabian, this has been a blast. Thanks everybody for joining live.
Thank you.
Going to go ahead and end the live stream here. But seriously, thanks so much for everybody who joined. And obviously for those of you who are coming later, thanks for listening as well. I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at Comic Book Herald online. I write at comicbookherald.com. This is Fabian Nicieza, and we'll include links to all of the places you can find him. Fabian, where is the best place to find you currently if fans want to?
Twitter. Usually the quickest, easiest way to get me is on Twitter. My DMs are open and will be as long as people aren't jerks. And you can get me at Fabian Nicieza at Twitter. Okay.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. I'm going.